Most seniors enter a nursing home months or even years before they actually need to. And by the time they realize they had other options, the decision has already been made for them. If you've been told that you can no longer live completely alone, I want you to hear this carefully. A nursing home is not your only choice. In fact, there are several alternatives that allow many older adults to stay safer, stay more independent, and stay connected to the life they already know. Today, I'm going to show you 5 of those alternatives. One of them costs far less than most families expect. One is already being used successfully by thousands of seniors who were told they would eventually need institutional care. And one is often overlooked until a crisis forces a rush decision. I learned this lesson from a 78-year-old woman who sat across from me in my office last year with tears running down her face. She had fallen twice in 3 months. Her daughter looked exhausted. Her son had already started calling nursing homes, and the entire family believed there were only 2 choices left: stay home alone and keep struggling, or leave the home she loved and move into a facility. What happened next completely changed the direction of that family's future. Because when I explained the alternatives they had never been told about, the conversation changed immediately. And the option they ultimately chose wasn't the one anyone in that room expected. But what happens in most families is worth knowing. Here is what happens in almost every family I've sat with over the years. A mother forgets to turn off the stove one afternoon. A father falls reaching for a box on a high shelf and ends up in the emergency room overnight. A pill gets skipped, then skipped again, and a routine checkup turns into a hospital admission nobody saw coming. And in that moment, fear takes over faster than logic ever could, because the adult children watching this unfold are terrified. And terrified people reach for the biggest, most permanent solution they can think of, which is almost always a nursing home, because it feels like the one option that guarantees nothing else will go wrong. I understand that instinct completely. I've watched sons and daughters drive home from the hospital already searching facility websites on their phones, already imagining the worst version of next year, already convinced that one fall means their parent can no longer be trusted alone for even an afternoon. A nursing home becomes the emergency answer to every problem aging presents, whether the actual problem is medical, physical, or simply that someone hasn't had help carrying groceries in months. But here is what most families never stop to ask before making that call. What level of help does this person actually need right now today for this specific problem? Because needing some support with cooking is not the same as needing 24-hour skilled nursing care, and struggling to drive at night is not the same as requiring constant medical supervision. There is an entire range of support that exists between fully independent living and a nursing home bed, and most of it was built specifically for people in exactly the situation that mother and son walked into my office with. Assisted living, home health aides, community programs, shared housing. These exist because the gap between completely fine and needs a nursing home is wide, and most seniors fall somewhere in that middle space, not at either extreme. Before we get into the 5 alternatives families overlook, I want to start with the one almost nobody considers first, because it's the simplest, the least disruptive, and often the only thing standing between a senior and the life they already love. Option 1, bring help into the home. I want to start here because this is almost always the first option, and it's the one families skip past the fastest on their way to bigger decisions. A widower I treated for years had lived alone in the same house for over 2 decades, and on paper, nothing about his health had changed in any dramatic way. He wasn't having falls, he wasn't forgetting medications. But grocery shopping had become exhausting, the house had started slipping into disorder he couldn't quite keep up with, and driving to his own appointments had turned into something he dreaded rather than simply did. His daughter, watching all of this from a few states away, assumed the answer was moving him somewhere with full-time staff. What he actually needed wasn't a different building, it was a different level of support inside the one he already had. We arranged a few hours a week of housekeeping help so the clutter and the dust stopped becoming its own source of stress. We set up regular grocery delivery and meal preparation so eating well stopped depending entirely on whether he felt up to standing at a stove. A transportation service took over the appointments he'd been quietly avoiding. And a simple medication reminder system meant his daughter stopped worrying every single evening about whether he'd taken what he needed that day. None of that required him to leave the home he'd raised his children in. None of it required selling the house, packing up 40 years of memories, or adjusting to a roommate he'd never met. What changed wasn't his address. What changed was the amount of support quietly built around his daily life, and that distinction matters more than almost anything else in this conversation, because needing a little help with the parts of daily life that have become hard is a completely different situation from needing to move out of the home where that life happens. Home health aides exist for exactly this reason. So does in-home physical therapy, companion care, and the growing network of services built specifically around seniors who are otherwise capable but need a hand with the logistics that used to feel effortless. I've watched dozens of patients stay independent for years longer than their families expected, simply because someone finally separated the question of does this person need help from the much bigger question of does this person need to leave home. Those are not the same question, and treating them as if they are is how families end up making a permanent decision to solve a temporary, manageable problem. This is usually where things stabilize for a while, patients settle into a rhythm, families relax, life looks from the outside almost exactly like it did before. But there's a question I ask every family at this stage because it's the one that determines what comes next. What happens when a few hours of help a day simply isn't enough anymore? Option 2, make the homework for your age. This next option surprises almost every family I bring it up with because it has nothing to do with medical care at all. It has to do with the house itself. I had a patient a few years back whose children were convinced after 2 close calls in the bathroom that the time had come for assisted living. She'd nearly fallen getting out of the shower twice in 1 month, and to her son, that read as a clear signal that her body was failing her. But when I actually walked through her home with her, what I found wasn't a woman losing her balance. I found a tub with a high, slippery edge, a bathroom with 1 dim overhead bulb, a loose runner rug in the hallway she crossed every single morning, and a staircase with a railing that wobbled when you gripped it. Her balance was fine, her house was the hazard. We installed grab bars by the tub and the toilet, replaced that 1 bulb with proper lighting throughout the hallway and bathroom, pulled up every loose rug in the house, and had a contractor convert the shower into a walk-in model with a seat. Within weeks, the near falls stopped completely because the actual cause of them had been removed. She never needed to leave that house. What she needed was for that house to catch up to where her body actually was. Falls remain one of the most common reasons families panic and consider moving a parent into full-time care, and study after study on aging in place points to the same conclusion experts have been making for years. Home modifications are one of the single most effective tools for keeping seniors safe without uprooting them. Grab bars in the right places, better lighting in hallways and stairwells, removing the kind of throw rugs that catch a slipper, replacing tub edges with walk-in showers, adding stair rails, or even simple stair lifts where needed. These changes cost a fraction of what a single year in assisted living costs, and they solve the actual problem instead of the assumed one. Often the limitation people are reacting to isn't the senior's ability at all. It's the design of the home built around them, sometimes decades earlier, for a body that no longer matches the one living there now. Fix the house and you frequently fix the fear that's been driving the entire conversation about moving. But safety in the home only addresses one piece of what families are actually afraid of. There's a different danger, one that doesn't show up on a fall report or a hospital chart, and it's quietly affecting far more seniors than anyone in the family usually realizes. Option 3, fight the real enemy, the isolation. Of everything I cover in this video, this is the section I most wish more families understood before a crisis forces the conversation. I had a patient living alone whose body, frankly, wasn't the problem. His blood pressure was stable. His mobility was fine. He could cook, clean, drive, manage his own medications without a single missed dose. But over the course of about a year, his daughter started noticing something she couldn't quite name in their phone calls: longer pauses, flatter answers, less interest in things he used to talk about for 20 minutes at a time. He wasn't declining physically. He was declining socially, quietly, in a way that doesn't show up on any chart at a doctor's office, and by the time his daughter brought him in, she was already convinced something was medically wrong with him. Nothing was. What had happened to him was simpler and far more common than most families expect. His wife had passed 2 years earlier, most of his old friends had moved away or passed as well, and the structure that used to fill his days with other people had quietly disappeared. He wasn't unable to live his life. He was living it completely alone, and that absence had started to look from the outside like decline. We connected him with a local senior center that ran activities 3 days a week, got him into a walking group with men roughly his own age, and helped him reconnect with a volunteer program at a food bank he used to support before his wife got sick. Within a few months, his daughter told me he sounded like himself again on their calls. Nothing about his physical health had changed. What changed was that he had people again. Sometimes families mistake loneliness for inability, watching a parent withdraw and assuming the cause must be cognitive or physical when the actual cause is simply the absence of other people in their day. Community centers, senior groups, church activities, volunteer programs, organized classes and outings, all of it exists because connection isn't a luxury for older adults. It's closer to a basic need, one that research on healthy aging keeps pointing back to as a major factor in both quality of life and how well people age overall. A person sitting alone in a quiet house for most of their waking hours can look, on paper, indistinguishable from someone who genuinely needs full-time care. The difference only becomes obvious once you actually ask what their days are filled with. Sometimes what a senior needs first isn't a higher level of care at all. It's a reason to leave the house 3 times a week and someone to talk to when they do. But even after solving for safety and solving for loneliness, there comes a point for some families where occasional help, a few home modifications, and a weekly social group genuinely aren't enough anymore. That's where the conversation usually turns toward something most people misunderstand completely. Option 4: Assisted living. This is the option I spend the most time explaining to families, because almost everyone who walks into my office already has the wrong picture of it in their head. When most people hear assisted living, they picture a nursing home with a nicer name on the sign. Long hallways, hospital beds, a facility built around managing illness. That picture is wrong, and the confusion costs families enormously, both emotionally and financially, because they either avoid a genuinely good option out of fear, or they jump straight past it into a nursing home that offers far more medical intensity than the person in front of them actually needs. Assisted living was built for a very specific kind of senior, and I see this exact profile constantly. Picture someone who can still walk on their own, still enjoys their hobbies, still wants privacy and a door they can close, but who has started struggling to manage regular meals on their own, who forgets medications more often than they used to, and who finds the daily chores of running a household, laundry, cleaning, basic upkeep, increasingly overwhelming rather than simply inconvenient. That person doesn't need round-the-clock skilled nursing care. They need their own space with meals provided, activities available, help managing medication, and staff present without needing to be present every minute of every day. A nursing home serves a different population entirely. It exists for people with complex, ongoing medical needs, conditions that require skilled nursing staff monitoring vital signs, managing wound care, handling feeding tubes or IV medications, or providing extensive hands-on assistance with basic daily activities like bathing, dressing, and eating. The level of medical infrastructure in a nursing home is significant, and it's built for people whose needs genuinely require it. I think of one patient in particular, a woman in her early 80s whose family had already toured 3 nursing homes before they came to see me. She could still walk to the mailbox and back without assistance. She still played cards with friends twice a week, but she'd had 2 instances of taking the wrong dose of her heart medication, and cooking had become something she avoided rather than enjoyed, leaving her living mostly on crackers and whatever her son brought over on weekends. Her family looked at those problems and saw someone who needed full medical care. What she actually needed was someone managing her medication, meals she didn't have to cook herself, and the privacy of her own apartment within a community built around exactly her level of need. She moved into assisted living 8 months ago. She still plays cards twice a week. She just doesn't have to worry about the stove anymore or whether she took the right pill. This is the option most families skip entirely, jumping straight from mom can't manage on her own anymore to mom needs a nursing home, without ever learning that an entire category of care exists specifically for people who need consistent daily support without needing medical supervision around the clock. It typically costs less than skilled nursing care, it preserves far more independence and privacy, and for a huge percentage of seniors who eventually need to leave their home, it's the actual right fit, not a downgrade from independent living, and not a watered-down version of a nursing home, but its own distinct level of care built for exactly this stage of life. But even with everything assisted living offers, there's one more option, newer and far less talked about, that an increasing number of seniors are choosing instead. Option 5. Shared living and senior communities. The last alternative I want to walk you through is also the one I get asked about least, even though I think it's going to become far more common over the next decade. Two of my patients, both widows in their 70s, lived about 15 minutes apart for years without knowing each other particularly well. Each was managing alone, one struggling more with the physical upkeep of her house, the other struggling more with the quiet of living by herself after 40 years of marriage. Their children, talking to each other at a community event, realized both women were facing versions of the same problem from opposite directions. Within a few months, one moved into the other's home, splitting the cost of upkeep, splitting the grocery runs, and splitting something far more valuable than either of those, the simple presence of another person in the house. Neither of them needed a facility. What they needed was each other. The one who struggled with stairs and yard work suddenly had help with both. The one who struggled with silence suddenly had someone to eat dinner with every night. Their children stopped worrying about emergencies because there was always a second set of eyes in the house, and both women told me, separately, that they felt less alone than they had in years. This kind of arrangement goes by a few names depending on how it's structured. Some seniors move in with their adult children directly, sharing a household across generations. Some pursue home-sharing programs which match seniors looking for companionship and split costs with others in a similar stage of life. Some choose small residential care homes, which house a handful of seniors together with shared staff support rather than the scale of a full facility. And a growing number are choosing senior co-housing communities, purpose-built neighborhoods where private homes sit alongside shared common spaces, designed specifically to combine real independence with built-in social connection. What ties all of these together is the same principle running through every option I've covered today. Most seniors don't actually need to surrender their independence to get the support they're missing. They need the right structure around the life they already have. Shared living and co-housing communities are gaining real attention right now precisely because they manage to deliver both of those things at once, security and autonomy, in a way that traditional facilities were never quite designed to offer. So at this point, you might be wondering something I think is fair to ask directly. With 5 alternatives on the table, is there ever a moment when a nursing home actually is the right choice? The signs a nursing home may truly be necessary. I want to be completely honest with you in this section because everything I've said so far is true, and none of it changes the fact that for some seniors, a nursing home genuinely is the right and responsible choice. If a parent or spouse has complex medical needs that require constant monitoring, managing multiple serious conditions at once, recovering from major surgery, dealing with wounds that need professional dressing changes, or relying on equipment like feeding tubes that require trained staff nearby at all times, that level of care simply isn't something a home health aide or an assisted living community is equipped to provide. If dementia has progressed to a stage where a person wanders, becomes unsafe alone for even short periods, or no longer recognizes danger in front of them, that's a different category of need entirely from the seniors I've described in every option up to this point. If someone is calling for emergency help repeatedly, with falls or medical episodes happening week after week despite every home modification and every aid you've brought in, that pattern is telling you something important. And if daily life now requires extensive, hands-on help with basic things like eating, bathing, and moving from a bed to a chair, around the clock, every single day, that is a level of physical care that goes well beyond what any of the 5 options I've covered were designed for. None of that means a family failed. None of it means love wasn't enough or that someone gave up too soon. A nursing home, when it's genuinely needed, is a medical decision, not an emotional one. It's the appropriate setting for a level of need that has moved past what any home, however well supported, can safely provide. Nursing homes exist specifically for ongoing medical monitoring and significant daily assistance, and recognizing when someone has reached that point isn't giving up on them. It's making sure they get the actual care their body now requires. The skill isn't choosing one option and sticking with it forever. It's recognizing, honestly and without panic, which level of support actually matches where someone is right now, and knowing that this can change over time, sometimes in either direction. I think back often to that woman I told you about at the start, the one who came into my office certain her only choices were struggling alone or leaving home for good. She never moved to a nursing home. We brought in a few hours of home help each week, fixed the things in her house that had quietly become hazards, and got her back into a community group she'd stopped attending after her husband passed. That was it. No facility, no permanent move, no loss of the home she'd lived in for 30 years. The last time her daughter updated me, her mother was still in that house, still making her own coffee every morning, still calling her grandchildren on Sundays, older, slower in some ways, but unmistakably still herself. That's what's actually at stake in this whole conversation. Not which building someone lives in, but whether they get to keep being who they are while they get the help they need. The moment you or someone you love needs support isn't the moment independence has to end. For most families, the real question was never which nursing home should we choose. It's simply, what level of help does this person actually need right now? And as you've seen today, the honest answer is usually somewhere in that wide, overlooked middle ground between doing it all alone and giving it all up. So tell me in the comments, if it were your choice to make, would you rather stay in your own home, move closer to family, or join a senior community built around people your age? I read every single one, and I'd genuinely like to know where you land.